What's up, guys? It's your favorite executive producer and sometimes host, Shawn. We are on the set of Look, Don't Touch, the podcast. Today we have our main host from the actual Look, Don't Touch show. We have Nabil Miftahi and Milly Kai. I will let them give a brief introduction on themselves.
You want to go first, Milly? No? Okay, all right. Guess I'm going first. What's up, guys? I'm Nabil. You may know me from things such as the banana episode, where they keep trying to get me to make a T-shirt of myself, but I'm not going to do it. Yeah, that's it.
I mean, I'm Milly, and you probably know me from the Sangria episode.
Choking me out.
And Milly is a ceramics extraordinaire and art director, and Nabil is he has a slogan. I don't know if it's true or not, but he is a photographer and designer. Do you want to tell him your slogan?
Semi-decent human being.
Yes.
Just trying my best out here.
He's definitely decent and semi at it. But again, for the listeners who may not understand the Look, Don't Touch show in itself, we have an art variety show. It bridges the gap between artist and audience. The podcast is an extension of the show for audio listeners, similar to like The Talking Dead for The Walking Dead, where we kind of expound and have expansive conversations around art so people can get a better understanding. And so in today's episode, we really want to talk about references in art, and if art transcends the original versus the reference, as well as does art imitate life or does life imitate art. And so I wanted to turn it over to our favorite hosts to get their opinion on, does art actually imitate life or does life imitate art?
Yeah, I feel like it's perfect because the two of us are also practicing artists, and we have our own ways of making things that either pay homage or derive like other inspiration from life and from experiences. And I think
I mean, I think everyone pulls kind of life references into their art, and that other art inspires their art. So yeah, definitely, and we both do that very well, I think. Let's try to.
Yeah, you can. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about like how you.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys seen the bootleg episode. So clearly, sometimes I make things based off other stuff, and
maybe like go a little bit more into it.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes I'll flip a logo or two. It happens. But yeah, like essentially, for me, I feel like it's okay to do that. Just you have to just put your own spin to it in a way.
I mean, talk a little bit about your practice and how you do that.
So for me, pretty much things I like TV shows, movies. I make T-shirts about them. Some of our favorites, The Casino, made a bootleg T-shirt for that. You guys seen the Larry David tee? And yeah, like I'm always just pulling from real life stuff. So I definitely use real life and in my art. So.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, Nabil uses more. Not really a reference, but you take actual iconography and images, and then you do like a post-production, like a collage kind of thing with your own twist, little slogans.
Yeah, I take
and
the stuff that I like from the stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like so my art practice is I'm a ceramicist and an illustrator, so how I make my pieces is always based on real life. I make comics about what happens to me, and they're kind of like a collection of things I'm frustrated about, things I'm afraid of, just like funny things in day-to-day life, things that are really like boring, mundane, and I make these illustrations, comic book illustrations, and then I place them onto pottery. So I think we both do a lot of like real life stuff and make them into our artwork, but then we do it in different ways. Like I make a drawing, and then you take actual like images and do a little bit more collage work.
Yeah, to kind of express myself.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I guess from what I'm getting, you're saying that your art imitates life a little bit more so than life imitating art, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I feel like it depends on the stage of the artwork being produced. I think like because I have functional pieces and because Nabil also has, you know, things that you wear, things that you spend time with, I think it switches the perspective of like art imitating life, life imitating art. It makes it a little bit more complicated. It feels more like a feedback loop because because while I make a functional piece, like maybe a mug, right, and it imitates, I make it out of an illustration from my life. Say it's about me answering an email, right? I'm really frustrated. I'll put that on a cup and I'll make it a little bit stylized towards like what I look like, what the email looks like all of those different elements, right? And then when that cup is finished, whoever takes that cup, it becomes part of their life.
So that's an interesting point, right? So I want to kind of like take it back to like, is this transcending past your inspiration, or is it even considered art in itself, or are you just kind of like remixing? Because, you know, there's a difference between like sampling and remixing, and we'll get to it. But are you guys familiar with Oscar Wilde?
Yeah.
So for those who are listening, Oscar Wilde is a famous screenplay writer and poet, and he believes that life imitates art more than art imitates life. And so, based on what you're saying, if art imitated life, right, that would be more like you saw a movie and you made an art piece directly referencing the movie. So similar to
more like, I guess for me, that's the way it works essentially.
I don't know. I feel like,
but I also try to add stuff to it to make it my own in a way. So it's not just like sometimes it's pure rip, but then I try to just make it through my scope, so it changes the actual piece. But in a way, yeah, I use those as reference pieces.
talking to me.
Yeah, I use those as reference pieces.
I think it's like, I feel like the art imitates life is like one column.
Yeah.
Life imitates art is another column, and then you can tally every single column.
Gotcha.
It's like depending on like what your process is and what like you feel like your artistic language is, what is more important to you in the process. I think there's like
it goes between
it's not too black. It's not like black and white.
Yeah,
it's like
there's a little gray area.
But so you kind of like touched on like what I wanted to speak of. So from a value perspective, as an artist or as someone who's consuming the art, like what's more important? Because on the flip side of it, right, if life imitates art is like the Simpsons, right? You look at Simpsons and popular culture and references, and people always look back and say like, wow, like the Simpsons did it first. And like looking at a cartoon like that's art, right? And so that's life imitating art before things happen. And so Oscar Wilde says that as an artist, our job is to create something. We're taught to see something from a different perspective, and our duty is to help people see it in a different lens, right? And teach them how to do that. And so I want to take it back to the value of it. So if you are referencing, sampling, and making things your own, do you think, I guess, creating something original, even though you might have inspirations here and there, but like something completely different than the reference, or specifically referencing, helps people consume the art better? Or do you think there's more value in creating something more original?
So I think it starts at the point of like remixing something, because people generally, with something they're familiar with, it's easier for them to digest. And then from there, you try to push your own agenda through that. So it starts with remixing for sure, just to make it easier to digest. And then eventually, as you keep growing, they start to see the other parts of it. So then they might not see the part that you added to try to teach a lesson. Okay. But later on down the line, that's what they see, because they're like, oh, I've spent enough time with this art and this remix version, but then they start to get the other portions of it. So it's definitely part of the learning process of like, sometimes you have to start with the remix to make it easier, and then from there you can do what you want.
Okay. Yeah. No, I see that. So I would like to segue, and Milly, I would love to get your opinion as well because of your knowledge in the art world. So like, let's say for example, Nabil, you mentioned like remixing, right? Do you think and like we even see it in like pop culture, but we can take it to you being like a ceramicist as well. So like, do you think that remixing, like a reference that you see, is more of a like a knockoff version, and are you devaluing the art at that point?
I have no like. I really dislike the word value.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's necessary when you talk about work. About the like art imitates life and life imitates art. I feel like you can see it in many different ways throughout the process of the work. Like maybe to the audience, like your Simpsons reference, right? It's like people look at it and they're like, oh, that was like the beginning, and then we make new things based off of that, right?
Yep.
So that is life imitates art, right? But I feel like before the Simpsons and creation of that, the producers or whoever came up with it, they're making something that imitates life instead of the other way around. Because if you think about it in an art perspective and like a production perspective, there's elements that is the same as real life, like the couches, the people, even though they're characters, they represent family. Like those are all elements of life, like elements of the now, the 90s, like whatever those like little references, it's relatable, even though the cartoons are stylized.
I didn't think about it
so
like
it's
that.
like in the production of it is art that imitates life. Like my ceramics, when I draw it and I put on something, it's art that imitates life. But then when somebody else takes it out of the context that I produced it in, it can be life imitating art.
That's interesting. No, that makes sense. So are you saying that it's a necessity to have a balance of both? Like it's like a cycle, like art is like a back and forth.
Like I said, I feel like it is a feedback loop. You just keep going back and forth, and it's just what happens. You know, it's unavoidable.
Yes.
I think that's what's brilliant about it. It's like you can do, like Nabil does, take directly like the image, image. That's like one way of doing art that imitates life. You take the direct image. But like I take an idea, it's based on a real life event, but I stylize it in my own way. That's another way of doing it. I feel like so many different artists have their own way of doing it that, like, you know, for example, a filmmaker is making like a fictional movie, right? They still take elements out of real life to make that movie, to make their idea. But then when that idea is created, it can be branched out in any other way. And that's how like these big cultural moments happen.
So let me ask you this then. Do you feel like we'll throw out the word value, right?
Okay.
Do you think that as a consumer, if I'm like for me, right? We'll do a pop culture reference. We'll look at producers.
Okay.
Sampling versus remixing, right? Like I enjoy a producer who can find an amazing sample from a song, which is it's an art, like you said. We're referencing art is imitating life at that point. I appreciate that more if it's a good sample versus a remix of a song, because it's the same song with just like added people, added composers. And so do you think it might do you think a remix dilutes art from an appreciation standpoint?
No, definitely not. I feel like that's just like two different ways of doing something. It's like for your own taste, you can like one over the other. It's like very easy reference, Andy Warhol and the Brillo boxes. That's a direct reference. He just used the ready-made boxes and made something. And then, you know, what if someone took that and made it into a painting? You can say, oh, like this is a direct sampling.
Yeah. Like
the actual piece taken from that, and then the painting of that thing is like a remix.
Okay.
You know, you can see it as that. I think it just depends on what you think is more important to you, or like that you're interested in talking about. But I think there's value in both.
Okay, so just like obviously, for those who don't know, Nabil also DJs. That is his fun fact that you wouldn't know about him. But even so, what's your opinion on a music reference, or even if we look at from a fashion perspective, right? We look at the art of the designers from the runway that go to like big box and retail stores, right? So like, for example, I guess my point for both of you is like, do you think that people might take advantage of like remixing and sampling? Because you remember the Balenciaga sock shoes that came out? Biggest thing in the world, right? But then you can see like knockoffs of those or sampling or whatever you want to call it at a Zara. You can get them at a Zara. Yeah. You can get them at a Walmart, right? And so do you think that at that point people aren't, that's what I'm asking you, do you think that people are depreciating or like diluting because they're more obsessed with the look and trends? Because I feel like trends also has a big influence on life imitating art imitating life, where you're not really appreciating the actual like design and art behind it. You're just like, okay, this is a look and I'm going to take advantage of this. And as a consumer, it's kind of like, okay, well, there's a Balenciaga the sock shoe, but I don't know if I actually like this anymore now because Zara has it and like Walmart has it and everybody's trying to do iterations of it.
I want to like key point out like two words that you used, which is obsession and appreciation. I feel like those are really important words when you talk about like remaking something or like making a knockoff of something. And also the last thing that you said is like, they don't like it anymore, they don't appreciate it as much because it's been remade so many times. Then you need to really like, I feel like at that point reevaluate what you appreciate in the first place. Because if it's the same exact thing just without the logo, did you appreciate the design or did you appreciate the price tag, the power, the class of that object? Because it's like these things happen because it trickles down because it's trendy, right?
Yes.
But I think there's no fault in like, I'm 15 years old, I want to look nice, I don't have money, I'm gonna buy a knockoff of something, but because I appreciate this design, and then being able to just accept that, like not saying that that's a bad way to go. Like,
I think it's a accessibility thing.
Yeah, it's like, like Keith Haring said something, he made $10,000 paintings, but then he started making a pop-up shop. He sold little postcards for $1. And he did an interview and he said, you know, if a 10-year-old kid really likes my work, but can't buy the $10,000 painting, then I'm going to let them buy like the $15 t-shirt. You know, it's about accessibility. I feel like when people don't appreciate something anymore just because it's popularized, there's other reasons for it. Like, okay, you can be fed up with this design going over and over again. I'm like, I don't like it. That's fine, but like, you have to have like, think about your reason, right? It's like, I liked it before, but now it's so popular, I don't like it anymore. And it's like, you liked it before for like what reason, you know?
So, a couple things, right? When things become popularized, in terms of remixing or sampling or anything like that, do we even consider it art at that point, or is it more consumerism?
Why can't it be both?
Yeah. Yeah.
What makes art art?
Person's opinion. It's one person creating something and people interpreting.
No, I think what makes art is the artist.
Yeah.
It's like if you're an artist and you make something and you're like, this is my art, that's art. It doesn't matter what anybody else's opinion is. It's like if it's a design from you.
But don't you feel like you need feedback or some type of...
No, that's just like, that's another thing of like class and power. It's like, okay, you're not a well-known artist.
Not about notoriety, but don't you feel like if I'm creating something, right? Like, even though like I don't know, Nabil, you're creating a tea, right? You don't need someone to necessarily like tell you who you are or if you're a big artist or not, but don't you feel like you need someone on the opposite end to be able to appreciate what you put out, or is art just like art to you?
But I feel like that isn't like necessary.
That's like kind of seeking validation in a way. Like,
it's like not necessary. It's like, okay, like yeah, you can still make work and it can still be art.
If you didn't,
if no one validated it, you would still do it.
Okay.
It's not up to the validation to determine if art. It's between you. Like if you think something is interesting, that's art. You made something from scratch, that's art.
So, do you think that remixing? I want to take it back to like obviously this feedback loop. do you think that it puts a lifespan on art?
No, because the thing about it is like one group of people might discover it now, and to them it's after a while. To them it's dead. But someone else might discover it, and then so it's a continuous cycle.
I feel like I don't know about. I get Nabil's point about like the discovery and rediscovery, but I don't. The idea of like a lifespan of something is really complicated because of what we're saying, the feedback loop. It happens over and over again, doesn't stop. So it's like things that people made in the 1920s through just reproduction and sampling and remixing and editing and like referencing.
Sorry.
It is technically remade over and over again in some type of way. It's like things made now always have reference to something before in some kind of way. So I don't know if there's a life span. I think it just keeps going as long as there's the remixing, reproduction. Like I think that's really necessary.
So you're saying it's a necessity?
I think it's not a necessity. Happens, right? It's a byproduct. Okay. Like it just happens. Yeah.
So let me ask both of you a question. Do you think at certain points that sampling and remixing would it also be considered stealing?
Well, I don't know, but so I think when you think of stealing, we think of it as bad because
it doesn't have to be a negative connotation.
Well, I think that's the general idea, which is the problem with the word. So maybe it's that's the thing. I think that's why we usually reference that instead of the word stealing.
Instead of like saying borrowing
instead of
or
I borrowed, I stole. It's like I referenced this. Be like I took this from that.
Okay.
And as long as I feel like there's referencing where you just completely take something and it's like, oh, I'm just gonna remake that thing. And then there's referencing where it's like I'm gonna remake but add on.
Got it.
So the adding on, I think, is the part that changes it. And anytime it goes through your scope, you're adding something on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's like it's a word.
Yeah.
It's a word. You can replace that word with something else and it has a better connotation.
So do you think there's any repercussions or negative connotations that actually come with borrowing or referencing or stealing?
I think it depends the group you're using it towards.
Yeah, of course. It depends on, again, like power structures.
Okay.
It's like if you're someone more powerful and you steal something from someone that's like that is like unknown, that is, and then you use that kind of power, that kind of money against them, I think that's like bad. Yes. That's like no bueno. But if you're a 17-year-old college student and you're really obsessed with, I don't know, Ming Dynasty pottery, and you really like drawing on pieces, but you don't know how to do that, you're gonna get really involved in that, and you're gonna be inspired by that. You're gonna try to recreate that.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like it's a stepping stone. It always depends on like what you are stealing or you're referencing from. And it depends on the power structures when it's good or bad.
There's kids who probably now they start drawing like college stuff.
Yeah.
But then a few years down the line, those skills they learned drawing that go into their regular stuff.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess that is the life cycle in itself is like you learn, you're taught something, and how can you push something forward?
It's so nostalgic.
It is, though.
Exactly.
It's so cute.
I guess. No, that makes sense. So, I guess, are we in agreement that sampling, remixing, whatever it is, referencing, transcends the original? Well, and if you are going to say yes to that, do you think that those work of arts are actually better than their original?
I think that's adding value again. I don't really...
If you had to add a value, and like we don't have to talk about like situationals or like, for you personally, are you the type of person to say, like let's say for example, I walked up and I saw a Picasso. You saw the one that the Greek police just confiscated?
Yeah.
Let's say for example, someone like a new artist decided to make something very like similar, right? And are you going to say like, that's cool that he did that and kind of paints in that same style? But I feel like because it's a remix, it's not a Picasso. And a Picasso holds a different type of nostalgia because of, like, I don't want you to think of it as like, oh, we're putting value. I want you to put value on it. I want to hear your opinion.
No, I can't, because it's like I haven't seen this piece, And also, I think everything has, you don't have to always like the remix of it. Like, you can like the simple, like the first one, like people have different opinions about the work. Like, for me, if I saw it and I was like, oh, that's a cool style, I see that you're taking reference, like, it's awesome, great. If I thought it was awesome, be like, cool. If I thought like the original was better, or I thought it was like, it was lacking in some way, or if it was like a direct copy, I would like want to ask, like, why did you do that? Like, what is the purpose of this? Like, you kind of have to learn a little bit more about the work and the purpose of the reproduction, or of the, because you've seen some like really awkward looking like remixes of stuff, right? But doesn't necessarily mean it's like
you can not like it, but someone else.
You can not like it, but someone else might like it. Like.
That's well.
It's also subjective to the certain person, I guess.
Yes.
I think I can't put a rule on it, because someone later down the line is going to be like, well, Millie, you said this, and now you're doing this.
That's because we are supposed to do that. That's what this podcast is for.
No, it's not. We're not telling you to follow the guidelines strictly, but we want to put a framework on how you should go, like how you should approach or think about specific things. Like for me, even having this conversation, I never really thought about life imitating art imitating life being a infinite loop. I always thought, for me, it was very yin yang, black and white, and I never really saw it from the middle area. But I coming to realize that like you need some of these things.
I think the main thing is just being able to ask questions about what you're looking at, instead of like being like, oh yeah, the new one is nicer. You have to be able to ask questions about like, what is the purpose of this being like popping back up, like I think it's also because art decorates time. There's so many different like reasons why something emerges again, right? So like I'll give an example. Y2K fashion, right? It's coming back again. It's like, why? Why is this coming back again? Because it's like nostalgic. Like, what are people finding in this that's comforting? Or what is it about this that they like? It's like individuality. There's more, like, it's not just one style now. It's like everybody has different influences. And it's because of like globally, people are, we're becoming more global through the internet and stuff like that. It's like, why are things popping up again? It's because they have another importance in today than they did before. It's like a revisiting of that thing,
Okay. No, that's interesting, and I'm glad you made that point.
It's like the Confederate statues. Why are people?
How's that the same?
No, it is. It's like, okay, it was okay back then, but now we're knocking it down because it's not okay now.
Okay.
And it's like, you don't have to preserve this in the moment that it was in. It has a connotation back then.
Got it.
It is a bad thing now. We should be able to get rid of it as change, right?
Yes.
So it's like the same thing as revisiting something positively. You can also revisit it negatively.
Okay.
So I think the timeline and the feedback loop is like continuing and all like, but I think we should be all open to like encouraging people to, reproduce
in a
sample,
perfect world.
post-production art and post-production in music, paying homage to your heroes. Like, that's always great.
Yes.
Like, I'm very lucky because a lot of my heroes in art are contemporary, so they're like an email away. But if like, I don't know, if like a student really loves Renaissance painting and they want to make a Renaissance painting, but it's like about like contemporary world and how this relates to now and the still like the bourgeois class or something like that. That's awesome. Like, do that, But don't feel like you're stuck in a bubble of like, oh, I don't want to copy someone. I think students especially are so afraid of the gatekeeping. They're so afraid of like being called out for copying someone else's style. I think we should welcome that. We should welcome, because that's how that's how I grew to where I am too. It's like I really loved somebody else's pottery, and I'll show it to you actually later in the studio. But like this one person did something that I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So I met up with her, and then I bought her work, and I copied some of it, and then I derived it into my own style. But it's like it was in an environment that it was like, I'm gonna help you out. This is community. Like, we're gonna help each other grow, and that is what like was great. You know, I think if we have this foundation, it's like you can't copy anything. You have to come up with something original. That's just a lot of pressure for someone young.
It is.
I think like people in the art world should encourage that kind of collaboration.
Got it.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure that that we each have some type of kind of just like brief synopsis. So I'll start with you, Nabil. If you had to have like one theme that you would want listeners to really get out of this today in terms of referencing art, sampling, especially with your expertise in design, what would you want them to really take away from it?
I think Milly said it really good. We shouldn't gatekeep copying in a way. Just if you find something interesting, definitely try to remake it because you're going to learn some skills along the way that are important to growing. And yeah, like it's fine. Like, hey, if you want to make fake call stuff, go ahead.
Okay.
He might come after you, but hey, try it.
You're
gonna learn some stuff.
You're gonna get a cease and desist.
You'll learn a real life lesson. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Just
Got
have
it.
fun.
Milly.
I think always my thing is just like ask more questions.
Okay.
When you do something, ask questions, and then just don't be scared of like the unknown possibility or like what might happen. I think a lot of people in any field, they make decisions for other people before they do it themselves.
Okay.
I think that is a big fault. I think you should just do it. Because it's like if somebody else's opinion or whatever like thought somebody else might have, that's just like in the air in your head, is keeping you from doing something that might be amazing for you as an artist, like to grow, or as a person to grow. I think you should just do it.
Got it. Well, for those of you listening out there, we appreciate you so much. We hope that you like this episode. Just don't be afraid to push the norm, whether you're referencing or someone's telling you you're copying and you're not supposed to do that. Milly says don't listen to him. Nabil says don't listen to him.
Yeah. Listen to yourself.
I did say it myself too. Don't listen to him. I don't listen to anybody, but they don't need to know that. But we appreciate you for tuning in, watching. You can watch Look Don't Touch via Private Arcade YouTube channel, the show, the podcast. This is Look Don't Touch podcast with Nabil and Milly, your favorite two main hosts of our show. And again, I'm a sometimes host. Only when my showrunner lets me. He's listening now. Yeah, you should hear this. But thank you for joining us. And we are outside of King David Tacos here in Brooklyn.
Tacos.
So we hope you enjoyed the natural elements that we provide each episode of the podcast. So stay tuned.
Yeah.